Okay, if you remember from before, I talked about the difference between the inside view and the outside view. I spend a lot of my time looking at the outside view, how what other people think about us affects their behaviour towards us. So, just to give you a simple example, let's say you've met someone for the first time, you've never seen them before. What do they think of you? Why do they think of you in a particular way? When they look at you, they think about your skin colour, your facial appearance, your body size. What are the factors that make them perceive you in a particular way and behave towards you differently or in the same way based on your appearance? And we distinguish that from what we call the inside view. The inside view is what you think about yourself, your own appearance, and how that shapes your own attitudes towards yourself and your own behaviours. So, other people are going to be talking about the inside view a lot today. I'll be talking more about the outside view and why that's still important and what we can try and do to minimise the negative impact of the outside view. Okay, first thing though. Everyone probably thinks, if I asked you, do you judge a person by their appearance? The answer is probably going to be no. No one will admit to saying, well, I judge that person based on their appearance, I judge that person based on their looks. You're not going to say that. But actually, all the evidence suggests that this is exactly what we do every single day. This is a very early study by Helen Basch and her colleagues. What they did was they presented participants, they had participants come into a lab, they were shown two photographs. One was an attractive person, one was an unattractive person. And all the participants had to do, I'll talk about problems about that later on, but so they were shown two photographs. They were shown two photographs, attractive person, unattractive person. All they had to do was say what they thought about the person, what they thought the personality of those two people were, how they would do in life and so on. And what these researchers found was that people thought the attractive person would be happier in their lives, had better personalities, were more popular, were outgoing, were more sociable. They also thought these attractive people compared to the unattractive person would do better in life. They would get a better job, they'd get the better marriage, they'd get a better life in general, let's say. So in general, what these researchers were showing is that people make judgments about others based on their appearance. I see someone attractive, I think they will be a better person in general and do better in life. Adolescents do exactly the same thing. Children as young as 5 years old think other adolescents who are attractive, or who they think are attractive, are friendlier, more popular, more intelligent, more competent, more honest, better at keeping secrets. I can go on and on and on. One interesting study found that adolescents, these are children, boys and girls as young as 5 years old, thought other adolescents who they thought were attractive were generally better at everything they do. Generally better at everything they do. Okay, so it's one thing to have these perceptions, but let me go back one step actually. So what Burchard and her colleagues were suggesting is that there is actually a bias in people's perceptions. People, when they look at other people, they think what is beautiful is good. Someone who is beautiful must have good personality traits. Someone who is beautiful must do better in life. And that is a perception that we have. It may not be real. It may not be based on any kind of reality. It doesn't necessarily mean that attractive people actually do better in life. It's a belief that we hold. It's a perception that most people hold. But do we actually act on those beliefs? In other words, do we treat people differently based on their appearance? Again, if I asked you the question, do you treat people differently based on their appearance? You'd probably say no. Again, the evidence suggests that everyone does. So, here are some research findings. Attractive adolescents are treated better in general. They're afforded more personal space. We give them more room when we're talking to them. They're more likely to win arguments. If there's an adolescent child, we're more likely to let them win the argument. We also help them more frequently, attractive adolescents. In one recent study, the researchers simply asked participants who they would help. So they had an unattractive boy, attractive boy. Who would you help following a traffic accident? Most participants would have helped the attractive boy. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, attractiveness also shapes friendship formation among adolescents. So in general, attractive adolescents tend to have wider social network, they tend to have more friends and more stable relationships with their friends. Unattractive adolescents tend to be socially excluded. particularly in team sports. So they get excluded from playing football or whatever. In general, they have fewer friends. It also works with the internet. So one recent study looked at Facebook. What they had participants come into the lab. They saw a fictitious profile, so a completely made up profile. And with the profile, they had either an unattractive photograph, attractive photograph, or no photograph. Obviously, most of the children wanted to be friends with the one with the attractive photograph. Most did not want to be friends with the one with the unattractive photograph. But or more worryingly even, they were more likely to be friends with someone without a photograph than they were with the one without, or with the unattractive photograph. Okay, so adolescents treat other people differently based on their appearance. Teachers, you're next. Unfortunately, all the people we like to think are fair actually also teach or treat their children, treat their school kids differently based on their own, or based on their appearance as well. Another study here. This was done by Margaret Clifford and her colleague back in 1973. What they did was they presented teachers with academic information about fictitious students, so made-up students. With some of the information they presented an attractive photograph, with some of the other information they presented an unattractive photograph. In actual fact, the information they were given was almost identical. The only thing that changed was the photograph. So some of the information, you get attractive photograph. Some of the other information, you get unattractive photograph. Teachers thought, regardless of the actual information that were presented, that the attractive person would be more intelligent, would progress further in school, and had more involved parents. So teachers are also making judgments about their own school kids based on their appearance, how attractive they are. Now, why does that matter? This is another study by Rosenthal and Jacobson, another really old study, but it really makes the point quite simply. What they did was they got, let's say I get all of you to come into the lab. I get all of you kids to do an IQ test. And then, based on the results of the IQ test, I tell you that you're going to be split into two groups. One group is going to be the good group, the bloomers group. You're going to have a growth spurt in the next year or so and suddenly become more intelligent. The other group are the dull group. Not so intelligent, maybe, we'll see. Well, actually, this is exactly what they did, but in actual fact, the reality was they completely did this by random. They didn't actually use their IQ test. Their IQ test was completely fictitious. They just randomly assigned people to the two groups. After a year, they did the same IQ test again, and what they found was that the bloomer group had actually improved their IQ, whereas the dull group hadn't. If you remember, these are all identical students. They were simply told that they were better or worse. So after a year, they turned out to be better. So what's going on here? Well, Rosenthal and Jacobson argued that actually it was about the teacher's attitudes towards their students. If you were told as a teacher that your students were good, you tended to treat them better, tended to give them better marks, grade their work more easily, more leniently. If you were told they were dull, you treated them more negatively. You gave them less teaching time, you gave them less, or you graded their work more critically. So let's put the two studies together. What is possible? It is possible that teachers treat their children differently based on their appearance, and that has an impact on their academic achievements. Let's say I'm a teacher, and well, I am a teacher. I teach university students. I teach older children. But let's say I teach my children in a particular way. So I base my judgments. I believe all good-looking children, all good-looking people will do better at university. If I have a good-looking student, I might mark their work better, might give them more contact time, and so on. If I think unattractive people are useless, not going to do very much in life, I'll treat them worse, and that will have an impact on their outcomes in life, on how well they do. Can I ask someone for a glass of water? Okay, so far we've talked about attractiveness and unattractiveness in very general terms. I'm going to take a short break, and you can do this bit now. The question here is, who is attractive? What makes a person attractive? Anyone got any ideas? Well, all the academic research suggests that actually among adolescent children between the ages of about 5 to about 16 years old, probably the most important indicator of their attractiveness, how other people judge their attractiveness, is their body size. It's probably the most important thing. Probably more important than their facial appearance. Facial appearance becomes much more important when we talk about adults judging other adults. But among adolescents, probably body size is probably the most important thing. In general terms, in Western societies, we tend to denigrate, we tend to make fun of, we tend to negatively perceive anyone who's overweight. And it's particularly true of overweight children. So, for example, here's some results. 96% of overweight children report negative experiences as a result of their being overweight. And that can include things like weight-related teasing, fat jokes. I'm sure you've all heard fat jokes. Your mother's so fat, etc., etc., those kinds of things. Derogatory names, making fun of someone just because they're overweight. Making rude comments about them because they're overweight. And particularly important is social exclusion. Excluding children who are overweight, especially from team sports or from any kind of activity where there is group work. That's what tends to happen. Gone too far. Okay. Here's one you can all do yourselves now. This is a really old study. It was done back in 1961. What you have to do, very simple. You've got 6 people here, 6 girls, 6 boys. This girl is average size, nothing wrong with her. She's on crutches, she's in a wheelchair, she's missing a hand. She's got a facial disfigurement and she's overweight. So participants came into the lab. These are children as young as 5, 6 years old, came into the lab, and the researcher said, who would you most want to be friends with, and who would you least want to be friends with? This was done in 1961. What they found was that participants, children 5, 6 years old, most wants to be friends with the average child, least wants to be friends with anyone? Yeah? The overweight child. Least likely to be friends with the overweight child, for boys and girls. So what you're finding here is that regardless of the physical deformity or physical disfigurement, children 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old least wants to be friends with the overweight child. Same study repeated in 2001. The findings were even worse. Even more or even less likely to be wanting to be friends with the overweight child than they were in 1961. In other words, it's got worse. In the last 40, 50 years, overweight stigma, or the discrimination towards people who are overweight, has become much, much worse. So, who do we blame? A lot of people talk about the media, and it's true, the media are important. I mean, if you look at cartoons are a very good example. Elmer Fudd, Bugs Bunny. Elmer Fudd is horrible, he's ugly, he's stupid, he's lazy, he's dumb, can't do anything right. This is how we portray people who are overweight in cartoons and popular television. On the other hand, people who are thin, I'm using Bugs Bunny, he's not a real person, but he's relatively slim by comparison. He's portrayed as intelligent, wily, clever, smart, he'll get the relationships. Think about popular television today, Friends for example. Friends is a good example as well. When have you ever seen someone who's overweight on Friends? Probably never. And when you do see them, they're usually there to be the end of a joke. They're the ones who are lazy, sloppy, they're never going to get the relationship. People make fun of them because they're overweight. I don't know if you remember Fat Monica. Friends is so old now. But Fat Monica is the classic example. She was there, she was just made fun of, she was the classic example of someone who's overweight, has no control over her body and so on. The same is true of all kinds of Hollywood movies. You can think of any kind of different examples you want. Big Bang Theory, has anyone seen that one? All the girls in that film are all slim, slender, perfect in their appearance. If you only watched, if someone came from Mars and only watched Big Bang Theory, or only watched Friends, you would think everyone in the world is thin. That can't be right. Now, the reason why I bring up the media is an important thing, is an important reason for it. The media are an important source for these ideals. We get a lot of our information from the media about how we are supposed to look, how we're not supposed to look. But they're not the only problem. Teachers, parents also communicate these ideals to us. I'll give you one simple example. This is a recent study done on how much spending money children get from their own parents depending on their appearance. So, let's say I'm a parent, I've got 2 children. One I perceive as relatively unattractive, one I perceive as relatively attractive. This is what the actual studies have found. Studies have found that I, as a parent, will give more money to my attractive child, help them through university with my financial support, compared to my unattractive child. Why? Well, the perception is that the unattractive child, let's say she's overweight or he's overweight, the perception is that they have to work for it. They are lazy because it's their own fault. They need to work for it. If they want to be attractive, they can. That's the perception that we all generally have. If you want to be attractive, you can. It's your own fault if you're not attractive. Therefore, you don't deserve as much money as my attractive child. So, my point is very simple. The media are important, but it's not just the media. The way we interact with our parents, with our teachers is also important. The way we interact with our peers is also just as important. Especially among young kids, 5, 6 years old, they get a lot of their information about what is attractive, what is unattractive from their friends. They generally don't get the same information. Your parents aren't going to really say, that person's unattractive or that person's attractive, but your friends will. They will say that person's unattractive or really attractive. Now, does it all matter? Well, on the one hand, you might say, well, the children who get positive feedback, the children who are treated better as a result of their appearance will do better. And that, you could say, is probably a good thing. In general, attractive adolescents tend to develop higher self-esteem as adults. They also have more positive interpersonal interactions. They tend to have more friends. They tend to be more outgoing, more sociable, etc. as adults. Now, you can say that's probably a good thing. The problem is what happens to the unattractive adolescents, the children who we say are unattractive or overweight or whatever. Again, the results all suggest that they develop more negative self-perceptions of themselves as adults. In other words, they're less socially or emotionally stable as adults. Importantly, they experience more negative body image in adulthood. They experience more negative body image in terms of their body dissatisfaction. They're dissatisfied with how they look. They also experience social physique anxiety. They don't like going out because they think other people will judge them for what they look like. Probably most important of all, they have poorer mental health well-being. They tend to have higher rates of suicide, higher rates of depression, higher rates of, or rather lower rates of self-esteem. So the children who we perceive as unattractive as children and who we treat differently as children grow up to be adults who are less well-adjusted. And that's why it's important. Okay, so what do we do? That's the point of all of us coming here today. What can we do about this? The idea here, the problem really is that we treat people differently based on their appearance, what some people might call lookism. We treat people differently based on how they look. So how do we overcome this? Well, some psychologists have started getting children to do what's called induced empathy. This is where you get people to take the viewpoint of other people who you would negatively discriminate or stigmatize. So, for example, if children are discriminatory or stigmatizing children who are overweight, you get them to take the perspective of the children who are overweight. Has anyone seen Beauty and the Beast on Channel 4?
Yeah.
That's induced empathy. You're getting someone who has perceptions of people with a facial disfigurement to take the viewpoint of that person. See what it feels like to be that person, to be treated negatively as a result of your appearance. It also generally involves direct intergroup contact. So we get people to work together on something, and that's called communal coping. Communal coping, you put together someone who's overweight, someone who's average weight, get them to work on the same problem together, and the theory is that it helps people to understand the other person's viewpoint. I understand that actually the overweight person is not lazy, is not sloppy, is not unwilling to do something or whatever, so those perceptions start to disappear. The problem is all these strategies have been less successful among adolescents. They don't work so well among younger age groups, although they do tend to have better success rates among adults. That is the question for us today. If we as a society are saying, or as a group of people here are saying that lookism is bad, we should not be treating people differently based on their appearance, then how do we overcome that? What do we do to overcome that? I'll leave you that question.